think being interactive means, that we have students interacting with the course content, whether that's by reading the lab manual or a textbook, which I know is crazy, working at practice problems or homework problems, as well as performing the lab experiment, which I think we saw a few of those already up in our word cloud. Thinking about what the students did in the lab as they write their lab report. So, getting the reflective aspects in, reflecting back over what they did in their lab. It's also interacting, of course, with the instructor or your teaching assistant, asking questions, paying attention, being engaged with the course and the course content. So what I want to do when I'm thinking about how to engage students, how to make it an interactive laboratory environment, is to think about how to get our students to do these behaviors and help them learn their chemistry. So at the same time that I'm thinking about all this, I'm also kind of driven by the questions of how can students at large universities have the same or similar experiences as students at smaller institutions? So can we design activities, labs, or even train our teaching assistants to drive those interactions between instructors and students like they would have at really small institutions, and really build that interactivity and engagement where they're interacting with each other, where they're interacting with their instructor, where they're interacting with the chemistry, where they're doing the manipulatives and labs, and really drive that engagement? And I think the answer to that is yes, but we got to think about who is the one that is being engaged with both the teaching and the content. So who needs to be engaged? Within my program, it's set up where I coordinate the labs. So I'm doing all the background stuff, the syllabus, the course content, the lab experiments, getting our LMS Canvas set up, writing the exams, doing the final grades. I don't have a lot of day-to-day interaction with students, but what I am responsible for is training those teaching assistants. And it's the teaching assistants, which there's about 25 of them, who are tasked with teaching the labs. They're the ones who are face-to-face with the students as the students perform their laboratory experiments, and are really the ones that are needing to engage our students and interact with them. And then, of course, I have all of my 1,200 students who come to lab every week who need to be engaged with the course content. They need to understand the underlying concepts of the lab. They need to know what they're doing when they perform the lab. They need to do so safely. And then they need to be able to reflect back and connect together the pre-lab content with what they did in lab and what they were doing in their lecture, so that they can write a thoughtful lab report after lab. So my role is generally thinking about what can I do as a lab coordinator and instructor to train the teaching assistant, whose job it is to then go and engage our students and keep them engaged over the lab period and across the course of the semester. So how do we engage our students? And I think the best thing that we can do is interact with them. Okay, so the first thing that I think about with trying to engage students and get them to interact with the course content and ourselves is through homework. And we want to provide opportunities within our assignments for the students to interact with that content. And I think that's pretty much the easy part, because there's plenty of options out there on how to get students interacting with the course content. Within my large class size, I think about assignments in terms of the digital tools that I can use to help them manage their work and us keep track of what work's been done, what their scores are, what feedback the students are giving. So I assign a lot of digital products. It starts off with our pre-lab activities, and I use, starting off with PlayPosit, which is some pre-lab videos that I put together and have students answer questions about what we present in a pre-lab through that software. I use Achieve, which of course gives us some background information, and I assign questions about safety and the chemical concepts that are in the lab. We also have a WordPress site where students can go and get more information about what's going on in labs, some background information for them to read that's embedded within our course Canvas site. Canvas is a fun LMS to work with, and it really connects together a lot of the digital products we use. In addition to that, I have a customized digital lab manual, of course, produced by Hayden McNeil, now Macmillan, which I hope students are reading before lab. And then in lab, the students are going to be performing laboratory experiments, some of which use pH probes, thermometers, and other digital instrumentation produced by MeasureNet. In addition to that, we have post-lab assignments for data analysis, which we have on Chem 21 labs. Their students are going to then write a lab report, which they're going to hopefully use Word, submit to Canvas, but at the same time, that's all going to be run through some plagiarism checking software. And so you can see there's a lot of opportunities for students to interact with the course material and the content through the use of digital tools. In addition to these tools, we also have a digital discussion board on Piazza. They've got their integrated general chemistry textbook that they use for their lecture. They can go and use the OpenStax text, because really the lab is somewhat independent of the textbook, even though our lecture class does have a specific text. But our students may not be enrolled in our lecture course. But that's not the only tools that we're using. We still use Lockdown Browser to give our exams, because we have thousands of students taking each one of our exams, and that's used both in our in-person class and in our labs. And then our lecture classes, of course, use clickers. So this is all kind of really crazy. I know it leaves me feeling a little bit like this, because we have so much going on with those digital tools, trying to get our students to engage in the course materials. I don't know if that's the best, but we try to build opportunities for our students to get engaged with the content, and hopefully it's helpful. But what else can we do? We want to provide opportunities for students to interact with the content. For labs, we think of pre-lab activities as asking students to write the procedure in their lab notebook, but we also think that we need to stretch that out a bit and see if we can engage students by asking them to answer questions and applying that content knowledge to solve problems. I think for us, our students this semester are really looking to get away from all the technology that's been used in the classroom and the screen time, and really have some good face-to-face interactions with their instructor. So as instructors, we need to get back, and I know like how I'm running my TA training is we want to get back to some of those basic teaching skills where students are interacting with their instructor. They're given opportunities to have face-to-face interactions, ask questions, and really get involved in our TAs apply some teacher skills, like being enthusiastic about what they're talking about, smiling, nodding, and agreeing with students, whether what their feedback to the TA's question is, whether it's right or wrong, and then redirecting the students when the students aren't quite right. And even to the point of switching from asking, do you have any questions, to what questions you have, to even say, okay, why don't everybody ask me questions? Here's the time to do that. So getting that engagement by interacting with our students and asking them to get involved as well, and setting that expectation from the start of the semester. So some days I know it sounds simple. However, I'm not the one who's in the classroom. So when I think about who has to be engaged and who has to be the one engaging with our students, that's really our teaching assistants. They're the ones who need to learn those teacher skills and apply them in the classroom. So this is, I think, where really good teacher preparation, TA preparation comes into play. And that starts off with a good TA orientation program, where we're talking not only about the program itself and what the expectation is in terms of the course that they are teaching, but also teaching the TAs how to interact with students, how to get students engaged. How do you do a presentation at a whiteboard or a chalkboard or through other media to get students engaged? And that involves getting a small taste of the pedagogy and a larger dose of how do you do that, and how do I apply this stuff to my own classroom or lab? So I feel this engagement is really has to start with the students answering the question, how does teaching benefit me? And many come in thinking that they're in graduate school, they're here to do their research, get their degree, and they don't stop and think that they're going to be asked to develop this third area of teaching. And so they don't see teaching as part of their career path. So I try to introduce teaching by asking the question, what skills will you need to develop and apply to your research and your career? And this will stump some of my TAs for a while, but eventually one of the first years usually asks, usually says it doesn't apply. And so I try to kind of wait that out a bit and say, do you give presentations of your research? Do you go to national meetings, or do you go to a regional meeting and present your research? And yeah, a lot of them did that as an undergrad. A lot of them are doing it right now as graduate students. And I try to make them understand that that's teaching. They're teaching others about their research that they're an expert in, and they're teaching people who don't know their research nearly as well as they do. And so trying to make that connection to something that's important to my teaching assistant has really helped drive that engagement. And throughout all of these discussions, I'm trying to call on the teaching assistants by name, smiling at them, pointing at different things, laughing, encouraging, and thanking them for participating, to get the teaching assistants engaged in the conversation during our orientation. So my orientation is filled with lots of questions, responses, dialogues, and activities, where I'm consciously working to point out to TAs the different teaching methods that they may have not seen through their own experiences as an undergrad and as a student, and point them out and say, look, I'd like you to do these things as well. These are known behaviors that are research-based that will help drive that engagement. And if we can bring that into your lab and classroom, it'll make the experience for your students much more engaging. I also have them think about the teaching methods. I have them practice. I have them go through a reflection following the think, share, pair method, to allow my TAs to think about and take notes and move around and really apply some of the teaching methods that I've been working with them. And then, of course, anything that I can't fit into my TA orientation, I've put in as part of a video series up on our TA training course. That way TAs can go back and view it when they're ready, whether that's right before lab or when they have discovered some kind of problem, and go back and look at it and say, hey, I can apply this teaching method to this situation, and use that as an example to take with them to their own lab. Each week I also have TA meetings. They're filled with lots of discussion. My larger course is usually Fridays at 8 a.m. And I know it's rough for a lot of them because sometimes like this week, for instance, we have proctoring of exams at night. So we'll get done late and they'll be back the next day really early. So it's really sleepy. It's a really sleepy TA meeting. So I think it's really important that I drive that discussion and the interaction and demonstrate for them what it is to have an engaging conversation with your students. So I like to try to build in that discussion amongst the graduate students to keep them engaged and thinking about the lab that they're teaching the following week. We do spend a lot of time talking about how to put together a good pre-lab, having the experienced TAs lead discussions and give advice to the newer TAs. We also talk about how to teach our students to provide feedback for their peers' reports, which is part of our peer review process. We also spend lots of time grading as a group, a selection of lab reports and recording those scores on a shared Google document. That way, all of my TAs can see firsthand the kind of variations that I would see in the scoring, to drive home the idea that we really do need to be consistent across all of our sections, across all of the TAs, so that our students have the same experience. So the students are engaging with one another at the same level and with their TAs at the same level. So what of this is actually applied by my TAs? And I'll let Tosin jump in there and explain that.
Thank you, Dr. French, for that. I would be sharing my screen now. So my name is Tosin Obisesan, and I'm one of Dr. French's 25 TAs for the General Chemistry Lab. And today I'll be sharing experience on how TAs in the laboratory classroom drive student engagement. So taking all the trainings that we have, all the intentions that have been put into structuring the lab, how do we translate this in the classroom and make sure that the students get the best of experience that they can have? So when we think about student engagement in the classroom, it could come in different forms. We could have this engagement in the traditional question and answer, where the TAs ask questions, you know, get answers from the students, or also encourage the students to ask questions so that you can understand or know things that they need more explanation on. And you could also have this in form of feedback, which goes in both ways, because if you want to engage students as a TA, you also have to be engaged. So giving feedback to the students on your work, on your performance, and also opening up conversations that allow the students to give you feedback on the course and the class. So thinking about questions like, do you understand the concepts? How was the lab last week? Do you have questions? Or even general questions about the structure of the lab. Getting feedback from these students is important to drive student engagement. Having them actively participate, because the laboratory course is an active environment. It's going to be difficult to have a successful lab if you want to use the passive or you don't have students that are actively engaged. So driving active participation, that's also another form of student engagement. Also emotional engagement. So in using the general chemistry in UK, the University of Kentucky as a case study, a typical class will have students from different kinds of major. So having these students show interest and show attention in the class, showing that they really want to be here, they want to have interest, they enjoy being in the lab is important, because this is very important for their success in the course, how much effort they put into the course, and how well they do at the end of the course. Peer-to-peer interaction is also a way to ensure that students are actively engaged in the lab. And the TA plays a huge role in ensuring that all these different forms of engagement, you get to facilitate them in the class, and you ensure that you have ideal or the right class environment to help every student to learn in the class. Taking into note the structure of the typical laboratory course, we have the structure where the students would learn the theoretical concepts in a class or in a course, and then they come into the lab to experiment whatever it is that they've learned in the class. After the whole lab experiments, the students are expected to get their data from the lab, interpret this data, analyze it, and then they get to report this. It is the duty of the TA to help the student find the connection between all those three components. And I say find the connection because helping students find connection is not the same thing as giving them information, hoping they will understand the application. They have all these different pieces of information. How do they find the link between this concept? How do they apply them? And one of the best ways to get the students to do this is by engaging them. Because through engagement, you can establish understanding. You can help students solidify ideas. You can help them clear up misconceptions, because when they ask you questions, when they answer your questions in the class, you know if there's any misunderstanding, if there's any information that they're not getting right, you can clear that up before they go at the end of the class to start writing their report and analyzing their data. So engagement gives students the opportunity to learn, help them unlearn whatever they've learned wrong, and also relearn and reestablish concepts. To drive this student engagement, have broken down the responsibilities of the TA in three different aspects. What does the TA have to do, or the instructor of the course, what do they have to do before the class, before coming into the class? What are their responsibilities in the class to drive this engagement? And then after the class, how do you follow up with your students to ensure that constant interaction all through the process of the course? Starting with the preparation, it's important to understand that the success of a class starts before the class. As a TA or as an instructor, you need to plan, you need to prepare so that you can perform. The level of preparedness of the TA greatly determines how impactful the class will be. as graduate students, as TAs, yes, we do have understanding and we have deep knowledge of the chemistry. However, being a great chemist or having, the in-depth knowledge of the chemistry doesn't automatically translate into being a great chemistry teacher, because teaching requires intentionality. You need to be intentional about what you want to teach. You need to be intentional about how you want to teach it. And in my experience, being a TA for about 4 semesters, this is my 5th semester, I also understand that experience does not make up for lack of preparation. It doesn't matter how much knowledge you have or how long you've been doing this. If you don't prepare enough as a TA, you just cannot give your students the best of experience for that class. And so what are the things that we need to prepare for? First, you have to prepare with, having adequate knowledge of the course content. As a TA, before you can teach, you need to know what you want to teach. You need to be able to identify potential challenges in the experiments that you want to, the students are going to come into the class to perform this experiment. Having done the experiment beforehand, as a TA or as an instructor, you understand what are the potential challenges that they can have. And with that understanding, you can prepare stimulating questions that can help them start thinking about these things, these bottlenecks before they encounter it, so that they know how to circumvent these challenges by the time they encounter it. Preparation also involves developing teaching technique. And teaching technique should be adapted to the context that you want to teach. So sometimes you have to change, or you have to be flexible with your teaching technique to help accommodate the kind of students that you have, the content of the course that you want to teach. Preparing all of this before coming to the lab is important, because that's what's going to set the tone for the class, and that's what's going to help the student to get the best that they can get from the class. Also, being able to identify potential teachable moments and learning opportunities. And teachable moments comes in different forms. They're mostly spontaneous, but preparing before class can help you harness these opportunities when you see them. It also goes to knowing that there is no wrong answer and helping the students understand that. So you put forward a question to the students and they give you an answer. Yes, it might not be the right and exact answer that you're looking for from the students, but taking that as a learning opportunity, because if they are thinking like that, then that's a misconception that you have to clear as a TA or as an instructor in the lab. That is a learning opportunity. That's a teachable moment for you to educate the whole class on that particular concept. And interaction is what will help you to figure that out and know that I still need to explain these things. This part is still unclear. There's still a misunderstanding in the class. Then time management is also one important thing, because when you want to drive engagement, one thing that we don't talk about enough is the limitation of time. You have a course content that you have to cover in a limited time, but you still want to get your student to have the best experience. I think the best way to get, to find that mid balance between these two is by preparing. When you prepare everything, you've timed yourself, the kind of questions you have to, and you're not just, running it or winging it, then you can be able to deliver the content and the important things within the limited time that you have to cover all the things that you need to cover. And after adequate preparation, the delivery of your prepared content is important. So let's see preparation as the intention. You have the right intentions, you've prepared. The attitude you have in class will determine if your intention will be properly communicated to your students. You have students from diverse majors that are in your class. So attitudes and characteristics like enthusiasm, motivation, commitment, confidence, these are characteristics that a TA must exhibit. And you get to transfer these attitudes to your students. Because when you're enthusiastic about what you do, when you are motivated, you show your student that I want to be in this lab. This is not a waste of your time, and it is not a waste of my time. Then they begin to see the relevance in the content. They enjoy being in the lab. And for some of the students, they're taking some of this major for different reasons. Some because they actually taking the chemistry class, for an example. Some are taking it because they need the credits, because it's a pre-med class, for diverse reasons. So what's to make them prioritize your course instead of several other courses that they need to write exams for and do assignments for? They do that when they enjoy the class. So you don't want them to come to the lab just because they have to be there, because they need the credit, but because they actually enjoy and they see the value in being in the class. If a TA doesn't demonstrate these characteristics, it's going to be difficult for you to get your students to enjoy and have a good laboratory experience. And then this also goes into building the right class culture, because to drive student engagement, I believe that the structure and the culture in the class is very important. You can have a classroom culture where there's this figure of a TA who is leading the class, and there's this one or two-way exchange of information between the student and the TA. This looks very traditional, but the disadvantage in this part is that you can best believe that the students that are at the back of the class, they're probably not engaged, not paying attention, or they're doing the things that you don't even know. Now, how do you help to improve the class structure or the class experience for all the students, including every student in the class? Yes, you can decide to have a structure where you have students work in groups. However, to be efficient with this method, you need to select the group such that the group is not too large. Because the disadvantage of having too large group is you have some students who will not be as active as the other students, who will only rely on the participation of the other students, and they're going to get the grades from that. But the best way, which is also one of the ways we employ in University of Kentucky, is by creating a smaller group. So we have the students work in groups of 2, and then the TA is intentionally driving interactions and engagement between the peers. So you have students working in groups of 2 doing the assignment together, having the right group size, because if there are 2 students working together, it's going to be difficult for one student not to be working and the other student is the only one working. Unlike when you have a group of 4, 5, 6, and then you can have some not working, getting results from the other ones. Then driving and intentionally driving these interactions among the students also helps them to be comfortable amongst themselves. So you create a classroom where the average student feels at ease to express themselves, because some of the students come into the lab not knowing each other prior to the lab. So what they see is 20 to 21 different faces that's going to judge them when they answer the question wrongly, or people that they need to be perfect with. But when you foster or you create a lab culture that the students can engage with each other, they can interact with each other, and it goes to asking general questions, and rather than have them answer, you just take a pause and say, discuss this with your lab partner, discuss with the people on your table. That way you are facilitating discussion between the peers. They begin to feel a lot more comfortable with each other. They begin to understand that their ideas are not being judged, and they feel a lot more encouraged to answer questions in the class. So having the right class culture can also help to improve engagement and interaction in the class. Using, this is a typical picture from the UK chemistry laboratory, where we have 4 students on the table, 2 of them are working together. So that way you can have interactions with each of the students, and then they can begin to talk among each other, share ideas, and also help to create a lively and more conducive laboratory experience for each other. One of the many ways that we also try to drive student engagement in the general chemistry lab is also by incorporating peer review system. So this is a major scientific practice that we know. In the scientific world, you write an article, you give a publication, you have experts in the field review it. So we've tried to adapt this system in the laboratory. And for my interactions with my students and through feedback, because I like to ask them questions about what do you think is helpful, what do you think we can do better, I've realized that they find the peer review system very, very beneficial, because after we have a typical traditional lab, they get to turn in their reports. And before the report is actually graded, this report is distributed anonymously between the students, and they get to grade their peers. So in the other lab, post-lab, we come together, we then discuss what is expected from a good report. We talk about the concept we want to see, and then they act like graders, reading through their 10 different reports of their peers, different ideas, seeing the way people are writing the reports differently, and then they grade the students. So they found out that this help them promote interactions. Because in this lab, we are not doing any actual work lab. We are just talking about the experiment. We're just, getting feedback. So that way everybody gets to talk. They participate actively. Also, it also gives the student a means to express themselves, because you have different types of students. Some of them are not the most expressive students, but by grading, even without being vocal, without oral expression, they can give feedback to their other students on their reports, give comments to their other students, also learn from their other students, from the mistake the students have made, to improve their own reports. As students, they've shown that this is really, really important, and this has helped them to be a lot more better in the course. Then also after class, it is important to follow up with the interaction or the engagement that you've established already in the class, knowing fully where that engagement doesn't end in the class. So how do you, as a TA or as an instructor, follow up on the interactions that have been built in the class, and then taking that after class, so that the next class or the subsequent class that you're having or the subsequent lab you're having, you can get better engagement. So using traditional emails, sending emails to the student after the class, telling them how wonderful they did, finishing their experiment on time, highlighting the things that you want them to concentrate on when they're writing their reports. This means of communication is important. Also making them know that they can always send you an email, letting them know that as your TA, as your instructor, that first point of contact for you, I'm just an email away. When you have anything, just shoot me an email, we can figure it out together. Building and fostering that kind of interaction somehow just helps the student feel a lot more comfortable. They begin to see you as a better and reliable resource. And that way, when they get back into the class, they feel more comfortable to open up and let you know, I still don't understand this thing. I need help with this thing. Unlike seeing that almighty TA who is just grading their work and helping them lose points, they begin to see someone that they can interact with and that can help promote engagement. Holding efficient office hours is also important. And I say efficient office hours is because the timing of the office hour, making sure that the student get the best experience from the office hour is very important. And being a reliable resource to the students can also help to improve engagement even after the class, letting the student know that we can always figure out the problem. It might not also be the laboratory course. It could even be the theoretical chemistry class that you're having issues with. Let's come together. Let's figure it out. Let's walk through the problem together. Having your student have that trust in you and knowing that you're really there to help them would help to improve the class experience and will help to engage the class. Because you have different types of students. Some students are more open to asking questions in class. Some would prefer one-on-one, talking to you via emails. You just have to reach everyone one way or the other. You have to adapt and have one means or the other that can help to meet the different personalities of the students, so that everyone has an avenue to be able to interact with the course, interact with the TA, and get the best from the class. In the general chemistry, we use a learning center, and all TAs hold their office hour in the learning center. So the learning center is open. You have students come in. This is an image of the learning center. The image is blurred out to protect the identity of students. And then, you get the TAs are there helping the students figure out questions. Sometimes it's not even the questions for the course that you're teaching, it's questions from other courses. But because you're a reliable resource, you can help them figure things out, figure answers, look through tests, look through materials, and come up with the answer, engaging the students. Also, because of this kind of system, students can also interact with each other. So you see groups of students on the table. Sometimes they're doing the same assignment, they're discussing it together, they're walking through it together, they're studying together, and the TAs are just there to guide them and to protect them. And from feedback from students, this is also one of the methods that they say they find very useful, that it has also very helped them so much in improving in the class. And talking about this also in class would also help other students who don't take use of these resources. So asking questions about the General Chemistry Learning Center, there's probably one student in the class who hasn't been coming, and they can think about, I think I should start coming to the Learning Center now, because people are getting so much from it, I can also get so much from it. So opening up this kind of conversation in the classroom when you have the opportunity to, because yes, time is also important. You need to cover up the main important concepts, would help to get information about resources across to other students in the class. And I'll be closing by talking about evolution, because I think as TAs, you need to evolve. You need to understand that the last class is a learning opportunity for the next class. You need to be flexible, especially if you have various classes that you're teaching. I think being flexible and adapting different methods for different classes is very important. Each class has their own uniqueness. Each class has their own size. You might have been doing it for a long time, but it's important to be able to look at what works for this class best. How can I get the best from this class? What happened last class? What could I have done better? How do I adapt the content and the needs for each class and to the uniqueness of this class? And I think by doing that, you can evolve, and that's how you can be a better teacher, be a better instructor, and also give your students the better experience. Thank you very much.
All right, so that kind of leaves us with the question of how do we engage ourselves? That's a big kind of an empty thing, I think, empty question to me, because it's hard some days to ask, excuse me, and think about how do we engage ourselves. So I think the first thing, is recognizing that some days it's a struggle, to be motivated, to get up every day and go to work and think about these questions. At the same time, we can also be inundated with lots of ideas, great expectations, and the drive to get everything done. And then life happens and that motivation goes away. Like I know with my role as the laboratory coordinator, it means that I spend most of my time in the office responding to emails, updating my LMS, writing exams, quizzes, fixing problems, endlessly fixing problems that TAs have or students have, and generally not in the lab itself interacting with students. So I think being present in our own courses, whether that's popping into the lab, say hello, how are you doing, see what's going on, or responding to emails promptly, so students know that you're there. Some students really appreciate it when I pop in and observe labs. The TAs, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But we definitely do make sure all of our TAs are evaluated at least once a semester with an in-person evaluation where we go in and we observe the TA's teaching. We also, I think it's helpful to talk to our peers. Meetings like this are great to come up with more ideas and see how others are handling different situations. That can be good, and to help keep us engaged as well. And I think it is important that we do talk with our students to get feedback from them, and that feedback be outside of the student evaluations at the end of the semester. Because I think that informal feedback and simply just listening to them talk to one another in the hallways about their course has value to it.